Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we're going to talk about how we can reflavor species from the 2024 Player's Handbook to create some monstrous races that are playable. If you want to play as something like a goblin or a kobold, there are not goblins or kobolds among the 10 species presented in the Player Handbook. However, you can pretty easily reflavor some of the existing species to be a monstrous race. And I know that there are some monstrous races in other source books, but if you don't have the other source books and all you have is the 2024 Player Handbook, well, this can be very easy to do. And I'm just going to give you an example of how you can do it. So for example, let's say we want to play a goblin, okay? They are a small sized creature. So we could start with the halfling species, right? And then we can just basically create a halfling, but make them look like a goblin, right? So it's like just reflavoring, but we can also reflavor some of the abilities. So for example, halflings have a trait called Halfling Nimbleness. We can reflavor this to make it Goblin Nimbleness, right? So this is just an example of how you can basically use the halfling template and then you can apply it to like a goblin monstrous character. With that being said, if you are up for a little homebrew, you can even push the limits of this a little bit. You can even change out some of these things, reflavor them even more. Not only reflavor the names, but you can reflavor what they do. Now, I'm going to go over a list of some of the most popular monstrous classes and give basically my recommendation for how you could switch them into the species. And in previous D&D they called them races. Now they call them species, but whatever. The terms are basically interchangeable. But let's say that someone wants to play a kobold. Well, you could use the gnome species stats for that. That would work very well. Let's say that you want to run a lizard folk. You could easily run that with the dragonborn species template. Let's say you wanted to run a minotaur, okay? You could use the Goliath species template for this, right? You could reflavor a little bit to give them a charge attack or something like that. And you could even have your players run something like a Yanti Pureblood using the Tiefling stats and Tiefling abilities. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can basically keep things balanced by doing it this way, by doing a simple substitution, right, and just reflavoring, but you can stick very closely to the effects of the species stats templates as they are in the Player's Handbook. This prevents you from like accidentally homebrewing something broken that could break your game, or accidentally homebrewing something that's just underpowered. Now, both of those things, like homebrewing something that's a little overpowered or underpowered, this is not a huge problem as long as you're willing to like adjust a little bit as they level up. And this is actually a great way to adjust homebrewed stuff. You can like make adjustments as they level up. With that being said, if you want to try to stick very close to something that probably isn't going to break the game or isn't going to ruin the experience for the players, this is a great way to do it. Personally, I think that this is super cool because sometimes you just don't want to run one of the core 10 species that are in the Player Handbook, right? I mean, I love all of these species, but I'm getting ready to create like I have this idea for like a Minotaur, character. And, like I could go find the monstrous stats for that, convert that into player character. With that being said, I'm thinking of running it, like I said here, basically creating a Goliath using those stats, but reflavoring it as a Minotaur, and then seeing about working with the GM I'm going to be playing with to insert some kind of like charge attack, because the Minotaur has the horns. That'd be super cool. So this is just a fun way to do this. And the reason I'm making this video is because I just wanted to inspire you, let you know that even though like there are 10 species in the Player's Handbook, there's many other species you can run using other source materials. But if you're willing to be a little bit creative and you are willing to like make some visual adjustments and maybe even do a little bit of homebrewing, which actually is super fun, then you can actually take the species templates from the Player's Handbook, and you can use them to play literally hundreds of different species. You could even go through the monster manual, find creatures in there that you might want to run as a player character, and then just find which species is the closest to it in the player handbook, and boom, switch those in. And then you could even use the monster manual as a source for getting abilities that you might want to put into the species template, or maybe even to incorporate as class features if you want to slightly modify kind of the class. If you want to talk to your GM about this, or if you're being the GM for your players, you could slightly modify the class to fit some of those like monstrous abilities. Anyway, I just wanted to share this idea in this video because I think that this is a super cool thing, and I think that it's fun to not feel limited to just the 10 species in the player's handbook. And I also think that a lot of people maybe limit themselves a little too much, and a lot of GMs maybe even limit what the players are going to play because they think to themselves, man, it's going to be kind of complicated tracking down all that information for those monstrous races. Or even like if a player wants to play something like really unorthodox, you might think to yourself, well, it's not a playable race, right? It's like, okay, no, that might be true. Or maybe you could let the player play the kind of character they want to play, and then you could use base species traits to convert it into something that's way closer to the playable, player handbook official species. And yeah, so anyway, that's just what I had to say about this, and kind of a cool idea I just thought of, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and I wanted to make a video about it. So boom, there you go. That's going to be all I have on this one. Thanks for showing up for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. I will see you awesome people on the next one.